everyone. All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we will begin the Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting. We might have some others join us, and I guess from the perspective, can you just check? We have 2 people on the phone just to make sure that we have a quorum, and maybe one of the staff can give me a thumbs up if we do have a quorum, but I believe we do.
Yeah, you have a quorum with the 4 of you at the podium.
Well, there you go. And we do have a couple, we have 2 people online. Joe Rosso is one of them, and we have a couple of people on the phone. So we'll just, if you want to identify yourselves, that's fine. But otherwise, if you come up during the conversation or if you have a question, just speak up. With that, we will begin. Number 1, approve Tax Exempt Review Committee meeting minutes of 12/22/20 and 1/12/21. And if there are any changes or corrections, otherwise we would accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of December 22, 20 and January 12th, 21.
And do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item number 2, application for a pilot for Tecton, and Jim Gilmore will start us out with that. Jim.
Okay, thank you, Dave. This is a request for a 10-year property tax exemption for an expansion by Tecton. It'd be a $16 million building and another $6.5 million in equipment. The number of jobs in the first 3 years would be 50, and then another 30 by year 5. The jobs are all over $15 an hour. The requested property tax exemption would be 100% exemption for years 1 through 5, and then gradually going down over the next 5 years from 80% to 60 to 40 to 20 to 10. So that after 10 years, they'd pay the full taxes. The application states it'd be a $16 million building, and the application estimates that the property taxes would be $221,000 a year. However, I should note that they have an existing 100,000 square foot building, and based on our assessment, that's valued at $5 million, and so I think the $16 million is probably much higher than it'll actually end up being assessed. So the actual value of the exemption might be less. Maybe I'll have Brian Oshheim talk a little bit about this particular project. Tecton has operations in both Fargo and the state of Virginia, and at this point, I think they haven't made a final decision on, whether they'll locate in Fargo or not, and so this tax exemption will be, part of their decision-making process. So I'll have Ryan maybe make some comments, and then maybe Tecton representatives are here and can tell us a little bit about the business and their expansion.
Yeah, I'll be real brief. Jim stole most of my thunder. So, Tecton, kind of a staple in the community since 1992. They had a pilot in 1997. It was a 20-year at the time. They've exceeded all the numbers in terms of job creation that were committed to at that time. They're at 239 positions right now and continuing to grow because of the tremendous growth in the markets that they serve. So, this is, I think, a really kind of fundamental economic development project, good manufacturing company, looking at making continued investments here. As Jim mentioned, they've got facilities in other states, Virginia for one, and they've got options to look outside of those regions as well. So this is kind of one of those situations where there's a lot about the community that's favorable for a company like Tecton to expand in. But as always, they've got to kind of look and be fiscally minded and look at all their options. So I'll let Tom or Lisa come up and just really quickly share a little bit more about the company and kind of their history here and this project itself and kind of what that means for the future of Tecton in the marketplace.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Tom Godis with Tecton. I'll just share a little bit. I mean, a lot of the details have already been covered, but I do want to mention, so Tecton, we're a Marvin company. Most people don't know a lot about us, right? We were the first of the Marvin companies to come to Fargo in 1991. We built a 30,000 square foot building and have since expanded in 97, and we bought another building in Fargo in 2013, and we built a facility in Virginia in 2005. So since we built that facility in Fargo in 91, We don't think of Fargo being a hub of high-performance window manufacturing, but between Fargo and West Fargo, we have 1.6 million square feet of manufacturing geared towards high-performance windows. 1 million of that is from the Marvin companies. 600,000 is coming from Cardinal IG and Right Screen. It's a pretty big deal for our community. We have the same type of cluster in Virginia, where we have a Tecton facility, window manufacturing facility, Cardinal glass facility. Our business model is to create that type of cluster. We have customers predominantly within Marvin. We do serve outside of Marvin into other industries, refrigeration, agriculture, other construction marketplaces. And we're really looking to grow our business in the spot that makes the most sense overall. You know, as you can see up on the screen there, we have land here in Fargo, you know, which is one of the components. We have land to expand in Roanoke also, but we're trying to locate in a way so that we can serve our customers, you know, have a good relationship with our supply chain, have a good employee base, and then just do the right overall economic thing for the Marvin enterprise overall. So we have a lot of discussions going around about how large we want our clusters to be. So that's one of the elements that we're weighing right now. You know, what can we support within one single cluster? And Fargo is the biggest manufacturing cluster that we have outside of our 2 million square feet in Warroad. So I'm open to any questions that anybody has. I mean, we're asking for this pilot program to help us in making our decision. It's certainly not one single factor that makes our decision, but that's what we're asking for today, for your recommendation.
Very good. We appreciate the presentation. We also appreciate you being here. Obviously, it's a great addition to our community. Are there any questions from the committee?
You know, I have a question on maybe more towards Mr. Gilmore, and that is the applications for a 10-year TIF, as opposed to when we used to do these types of primary sector job creation ones. Our standard is always a 5-year, 100%. And so why in this case did we not do that type of application? Why are we looking at a TIF in front of us?
I think just because of the large capital investment and the large number of jobs, the jobs over 15, I mean, our standard has been on most projects, it is that 5-year, 100% exemption. When there's been larger ones like Apario, you know, where there's a lot more jobs and fairly good pay, we've gone longer. But we've always, or almost in every case, we've had them start to pay some property taxes in year 6.
Right.
And so that's what they propose here. Sometimes it's been a straight 50% a year for 5 years. In this case, you know, they have an 80% exemption, and it goes down there to 10%. I think as businesses like this expand, you know, it's a little easier to plan for it to gradually go up rather than just some abrupt changes. Plus, this way the taxing jurisdictions start to see some benefit in year 6 that they might not otherwise see. So, you know, if you look at how this one scores, it scores very well. And again, high number of jobs, good pay, major investment of $16 million.
Mayor Mahoney.
You'll be asked by the commissioner sometimes, would you go forward with this project if you didn't get the TIF? So just in preparation for that, I presume I'm competing with Virginia. So why would I build in Fargo? We're part of that multiple faceted decision making. Is that true?
Yeah, correct. I mean, you know, our goal would be to build where we have a manufacturing facility already. So Fargo, and then Salem, Virginia, Roanoke County is where we have our facility in Virginia. You know, greenfielding another facility is, you know, slightly more expensive from an overhead standpoint, but it's not off the table at this point.
So that's important to say. We're very, very happy to have you as an employer in our community, and you guys have done great. We appreciate the people you employ. So we feel great to have an expansion, and you're expanding by a considerable amount. So that really helps our community, and job market is really a big thing in our community as well. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
So Jim, I just have a couple of more questions. So it's 10 employees a year. I'm looking at page 3 on our booklet. So that's what the projected growth is right now. Is that correct?
No, that's the number of part-time employees, which will say the same. If you look at number of full-time employees, they'd go from 239 to 255, and then it would gradually increase up to 320. So
Okay.
a gradual increase of 80 jobs over 5 years.
So it's 80 jobs over 5 years.
Yes,
Okay, and then,
is that correct?
Yeah, and I can maybe speak, if we don't do this expansion in Fargo, our Fargo facility is full. We have room to add a few more people this year, and then we can't fit any more lines in. And our growth really occurs based on number of production lines, and some of our employees have been saying we're full for the last 5 years, but I said, not yet. So next year, we're full.
and I apologize for the basic questions, but that's sometimes the way it goes around here. So the other question I had, Jim, so you talked about on page 2 at the bottom, the annual amount of tax exemption is 221,752, but then you'd subtract out the existing property, or can you explain that to me too?
No, so right now, their existing plant, I believe the land is worth about 3 million and the building is worth 5 million. They're gonna build a $16 million building, and that is valued at $160 a square foot. And so they estimated that the assessor would value it at that amount. I don't want to do Mike's job for him, but when I look at other industrial buildings, rarely have they been assessed at $160 a square foot. He'll look at it compared to others. So it could be that this building is worth, 6 million to 10 million versus a 16. So I'm just, as far as the city is concerned, the value of this exemption, I suspect, is less. And I don't know, Mike, if you want to comment on how you value industrial buildings, or if you have any questions on that, but.
So I guess my question, so it's a projection right now, it's an estimate of what it will be, but until the building is built and you do an assessment, you really don't know.
I really don't know, and I think they're estimating high. I think this is a high number. I want that to go into your decision making. That I don't think it'll end up being this in the long term. Jim, I know you value industrial property too, and I don't know if you concur with that assumption.
I do. I noticed that when I was reading the application, that it seemed a little high in my experience.
We thought so too.
We hope that's the case. We don't have a design, and the building is just a very rough, high-level estimate right now. We haven't engaged in a contractor or gotten any real hard numbers on anything.
Right.
So we're just basing it off a very, very rough estimate and trying to aim high as well. So we're prepared for something lower ourselves.
But just to summarize, we're trying to be conservative, basically,
Yeah.
the city staff is, as to what the number will be. Would that be the explanation boiled down?
Yeah, I think, they're saying this, at most, this value, property tax exemption would be at 221. But we really won't know the value. The exemption, they'll pay what it is, whatever it turns out to be.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by anybody? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for being in Fargo. We really appreciate it. And we know it was, there were a lot of other options when you originally moved here. And so we appreciate it and all you've done. The economic impact of your business over the years has been substantial, and so we appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you guys for your time today.
We just wish you'd bring the walleye down from Lake of the Woods to our river so we could catch more fish.
Okay, moving on to number 3. Can we please have order on this committee, please? We will not accept any fish comments. All right, number 3, new industry application by Packet Digital. Jim.
This is a request from Packet Digital for a property tax exemption on their facility that they would be acquiring at 3241 University Drive. This building is now valued at $717,000, and so we can give you a much more accurate estimate of what the property tax exemption would be worth. And they're applying for the standard 5-year, a little over $10,000 a year. What they're proposing to create is there'd be 4 jobs initially. No, excuse me, it'd be about 13 jobs initially in the first year, an additional 12 by year 3, and maybe an additional 18 by year 5. These jobs are all over $20 an hour. Many of them are over $35 an hour. So these are more engineering, high-tech jobs. In the 5-year property tax exemption, maybe I'll have Ryan, or maybe I'll just go ahead and have Terry tell us a little bit about the company. It's pretty complicated, and so I'll have her go through that, and then Ryan, maybe you can follow up and talk about how this is a good type of industry we're trying to get here in Fargo. Terry Zimmerman with Packet Digital.
Thank you for the time today and the consideration. I also have with me Bill Daggett, a new team member. He's retired from the Air National Guard, 12 years with the Air National Guard, recently joined the team to assist in some of these new programs. We're excited to be growing now in this challenging time that we've all been facing. We have some new programs in place, so I'm thrilled to be talking about some of those today. We have about 150 years of engineering experience at our company with 15 patents. We have a large experience in power management going back 17 years. We've been building a number of different kinds of products. We're evolving into a new era now with the move to lithium-ion batteries and a need for US-made solutions. 90% of the solutions today are made in China and lack the quality and the standard ratings that are needed. Even in the recent Biden executive order, he's calling for US-made power management and battery solutions. We've recently secured some new contracts to build battery systems here in Fargo. I'm excited to be embarking upon this with some exciting customers that I'll talk about. But our experiences in power management, system integration and software, electrical engineering. The image that you see up there is PCB that is our battery management system. In the past, we have outsourced our manufacturing if we needed US-made solutions to a company in Idaho. With these new contracts, we're proposing to move into a building in South Fargo and convert what was previously a studio into manufacturing. So they have about 3,300 square feet that we would convert into a manufacturing facility. So we're going to be making battery modules for the unmanned aircraft market and also taking some of the technology that we have innovated and moving that into the next generation space vehicles for a program that we have our kickoff meeting next Tuesday on that program. We have many demanding customers across the world, many military customers that we've worked with and commercial customers, and you'll see a little bit of their products in the presentation. We've been recognized in the industry. I don't know if you're familiar with Gartner Group. Packet Digital was recognized as one of the cool vendors with our power management innovation and patents and algorithms. We develop technology around smart batteries and a battery management system that goes with that. The battery that you see there was manufactured in Idaho. We're proposing to bring that manufacturing to North Dakota. Basically, we make the battery intelligent. With this move to lithium ion, it's much safer than previous batteries. We built some safety features in to pull data and information of the performance of the battery and the safety features so the users will have access to that information. We have also built software to go with the battery systems. If you have 10 drones, you probably have 4 to 8 times that many batteries. So today, a lot of people will take a Sharpie and they'll mark on the battery how many times they've used it. And we developed a fleet management for batteries. So it tracks all of the performance on that battery, tells you if you're going on an important mission, what batteries you might want to take on that mission, lets you know before a problem occurs what batteries you want to retire and what you want to use for your important missions. We also build charging systems to go with this platform. We partnered with a company in Fargo, Ready, to do the mechanical engineering on this product. This enables the user to charge their batteries safely. It pulls all the information off the batteries and the battery management systems. They can put this in a rack mounted, it's all steel enclosured for safe charging. This is an image of one of our customers' platform. You can see this is a VTOL, a vertical takeoff and landing system. It is a heavy payload unmanned aircraft system, carries up to 70 pounds. It's about as tall as a person stands. It presents a lot of power management challenges, and we're building a battery management and charging system for this DoD customer. This is another contract we've just received. We're building a battery management system for this DoD contractor. This is a smaller drone used to carry a high-resolution camera, a portable system. We're building a charging system and a full battery module. This is our transition into making the whole module here in Fargo. And our contract spans 3 years on this program. This is another image of our product. On the lower side, our battery management system. We've built these systems for electric vehicles, low-cost systems. We also have recently built a battery management system for an electric race car. We were able to lighten the load on this battery system by 1 pound and reduce the amount of pit stops the customer would need to make in evaluating with the smart information coming off the battery. This is related to the new program that we're launching with Senator Hoeven's help. We'll be transitioning some of this new technology to space vehicles, working with the Air Force Research Lab. We do have a patent on our smart battery technique. We're able to extend the shelf life of the battery with our algorithms and sleep modes. We have been looking for a place to begin doing manufacturing in North Dakota. We've identified a location in South Fargo. They previously had a very large garage space that we would like to convert to a manufacturing location. So we're excited to be in Fargo. We've created jobs in North Dakota. The jobs will be electrical engineering, software, and smart battery manufacturing positions, all over $20 an hour.
Very good. Any questions? And I will say that on page 16, the score is obviously a very high score, so that's a good indicator. I don't know if there's any other questions. The other thing is, it's just awesome. This is fun to come and learn about this, because this is fantastic and obviously a great addition to any community. I think but it's fun to learn about it because it's very exciting. So, although the race car, we'll have to keep that away from the mayor. That's the only thing I'm worried about.
I'd add too many pounds.
Any questions?
Ryan, if you want to make any comments, I mean, this is a type of industry that North Dakota's been trying to attract, with Terry's been involved with the Autonomous Vehicle Research Institute up at UND. And so the more of these types of businesses we get in the state, I think that's the future.
Well, I mean, it kind of sells itself, but I would add, this is a company that, the engineering and they're innovating in spaces that are really critical to economic diversification in the state. So you heard Terry talk about unmanned aircraft systems. I'm reaching out to those sectors and companies around the nation, and I'm talking to them about opportunities and why they should be looking at Fargo in the region as a place to bring their UAS companies and bring their activities. And they're telling me, oh, I'm actually going to be in Fargo later this week. I'm meeting with a company called Botlink Packet Digital about battery management systems. So they're providing those solutions here. It's a great fit for that ecosystem that we're trying to build and grow here. And it's kind of one of those technological gaps that power management is going to be critical to making these technologies kind of as economically feasible and unlock their full potential. So that's one thing that I think shouldn't be understated about this company and what they're doing. But then just kind of the growth. So this is kind of an evolution. This is the company shifting from really kind of design, engineering, R&D to kind of now commercializing and manufacturing those technologies, and that's a part of a growth cycle. So, I expect to see, and Terry could talk to this better than I could, to see them continue to grow and make investments in this market. So I think this is kind of one stepping stone along the way to much bigger things.
And obviously, thanks the EDC for all the help and Mayor.
Terry, I'm impressed you chose Fargo. I know you have a variety of places you could have situated this, and I'm sure Grand Forks very much wanted you up there, and I'm sure the other places in the country wanted you. So we're very pleased you're making your footprint. I'm surprised you can manufacture in such a small space, but you're all about making things in small spaces, so we very much appreciate that. And I agree, Dave, this is a great addition to our community.
The other thing, don't be afraid to come back if you need a future growth space. We're happy to have repeat customers. And so hopefully this is the beginning of a long relationship. And if you come back here many times, you might get tired of seeing us, but we'll never get tired of seeing you. So with that, do we have a motion? First of all, any other comments? There are people online and things like that. And anybody else have a question or comment? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on. Number 4, Riverfront Renewal Plan and TIF District. Jim.
This is more just for your information. At this point, this renewal plan was initiated by the city commission, and it includes a wide range of activities. Some of the activities, I think, will come back to this committee because there'll be some development incentives requested and needed for redevelopment along the river. And so those individual requests for development incentives would be reviewed, I think, similar to other applications. The actual public activities would be more just directed by the city commission, but I just wanted you to have an overview of this plan. I think a lot of you attended the recent city commission meeting I had on tax increment financing, so I'll kind of skip the first part and just talk about how we're trying to implement this downtown plan. Calls for a lot of commercial mixed use along the river. Some of the activities that we're trying to have for development potential. I think there's a lot of potential for housing. And that's where I think we'll get into some development incentives as we to implement this plan. But you can see these different sites downtown, our old health building, as well as the old school district warehouse. As those become available, I think those might be a good housing or other sites. And of course, this was obviously in the news yesterday, the Mid-America Steel site. We're looking at a flood protection plan there and a way to kind of make a portion of that site available, as well as there's some private property to the northeast that's been available for sale. There's actually a Renaissance Home project on one of those sites. And the other site where we're seeing redevelopment is kind of where the frying pan is at 300 Main. There's a new building going up there. The city owns the property portion of what used to be the Park East apartment. We're talking with the Diversion Authority about selling that and making that available for development. And then Prairie St. John's is looking at, or has a foundation in for a new hospital that we expect to be, started soon. So as far as the activities for the next year is, I think some of these city buildings can be, sold and redeveloped. And again, I think it may require some pilot housing incentives, and we'll probably do the but-for test on that. And so, again, this is more that you're familiar with the overall plan. Again, I won't go through it in detail because I think a lot of you, saw it before, but just some different partnerships that we can have. Then some longer-term activities. Some of the TIF money would be used for public amenities in and around the city hall site. And more redevelopment incentives probably, further on. So anyway, I just want to make sure you're aware of this plan, and so as you see applications in the future, they'll be aimed at implementing this plan. This plan will go through the city commission 2 weeks from now. So I see this as an additional incentive or additional tool in addition to the Renaissance Zone. Includes a lot of these blocks as well as the Opportunity Zone. So just want to see if you have any questions on this before we move on.
Can I ask a question, Jim? Can you go back to, I think it was slide 34, the Mid-America Steel site? whichever slide that was. So can I ask you, so right now there's a hash mark through that where, the flood, flood control, you can't build on certain, have we revisited that after we know the diversion numbers and if we build some protection, could you change that hash mark?
Yeah, I think we can, and I didn't include the map, but I'll be following this pointer, but essentially the engineers now have a plan where they would bring a flood protection kind of through this area and then down. So, yeah, I think then we could move this hash mark over more towards this area, and that would leave a roughly 4 acres for redevelopment.
Can I ask one more question about that? And if anybody else has any questions, jump in. But the other thing is, obviously, with what happened yesterday, this fire, are there some buildings now that to me, the other thing is it's starting to look a little bit run down, that area. I mean, there's some windows that are broken out, and now with this fire, do we have a plan for at least starting to dismantle some of that?
We've done some environmental studies, and unfortunately, we didn't get the asbestos out before the fire. But if you look out the window, you'll see there's a backhoe out there now knocking down the face of some of that building. So some of it was so structurally unsound that the fire chief is bringing in equipment to demolish some where the roof has collapsed. But yeah, I think we need to probably spend a little more time, spend some money. Again, one of the things in this renewal plan is to take some TIF money and commit it towards cleaning up this site or demolishing portions of the site so that it can be redeveloped. There's interest in developers, but there's also a lot of caution because there's an unpredictability here. No one knows how many fuel tanks are there or how much concrete there is. So the more we can have that information available, the more serious interest we'll get from developers.
And I guess one more question, and then Bruce, you can talk. But the other question is, the money from this, is there a way we can keep track of it and start doing some of those things and then apply it down the road for that property? So Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, just to kind of give an update, it seems like we acquired that property some time ago, and what we've been in the process of doing is completing an EPA Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessment. Those have both been completed now, and we're getting a third summary document that tells us what's there that was going to allow us lay out a plan for remediation and redevelopment. So a little slower than we had hoped, but we were right at the preface of that before the fire.
And we've had some test wells on the site checking, for any petroleum that has been spilled in the past. So that's all information we need to know before we can really decide what can be the future use of this property.
Just one more question, but is there a way we could start doing this and finding a way to pay for it and then applying it to the property? Is there a system for that? There is. Okay, can you just?
Hey, Commissioner, I think what we could do once this TIF is approved, you could essentially, start to spend money to do the demolition, and then you get reimbursed when the development happens up and down the river to pay yourselves back from whatever you spent. So that would be the mechanism that I see where you could get started relatively soon.
So this is just my opinion. To me, it's starting to look, we have to start taking some action, I think. And so however we can do that, and I know you have to proceed, but at this point, and there's some of those things we want to preserve or reuse if possible, yeah. But there's a lot that needs to go.
I should add that with that EPA grant, planning has been actually having an engineer and architect work on some demolition specs, for these buildings. So we've been, we're headed in that direction, and I agree with you, we need to speed up.
Jim, how many existing TIFs do we have in the downtown area right now?
There are, I believe, 5. There's 2 quite small ones, the Great Northern Depot that'll, that redevelopment, the one that had to do with the Fargo Inn Hotel, Roberts Commons Garage, the Mercantile, and Block 9.
So at least 2 of those 3 are dropping off relatively soon, I think.
Yeah.
Is this area depicted in the plan? That whole thing is intended to be one big TIF district?
Yes, it would. That's kind of different than what we've done in the past.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this. It's a little unusual. It's bigger than typical, at least in the downtown area, right? So
Right, we've done some on the fringe, the
Right.
Fayland Industrial Park, I think you're familiar with that
Yeah.
one, as well as the one it's expired now, but the one out by Anderson Field was almost a square mile.
Right, so this committee and the community in general has been sensitive to layering of incentives, right? Between Renaissance Zone, pilots, TIFs, throw in a primary sector 5-year in there, whatever, and we're trying to control that through policy controls. We're gonna talk about that later, I think. So how would that affect a large geographic district like that? The potential layering of incentives. I mean, if there's some of that area is covered in Renaissance Zone, or we have a manufacturer that wants to do a facility and wants a 10-year tax break, but we've already got a TIF created, that creates a lot of complexity. So how, generally speaking, how do you think we
Yeah.
will deal with that?
I mean, it does bring complexity because often with a TIF, we're giving, we're providing a portion of their property taxes back to them. So if we provided some sort of a development incentive, then that won't be TIF revenue money. So even though you can have all these different incentives in one location, it's only exempt once.
Right.
Because you either pay taxes or you don't. The development incentives are generally limited to 15 years. The city can run this for 25 years. So you could have a case where someone's exempt for 5 years, and then after 5 years, that TIF money would then be available for some of these city activities. But you're right, it's a lot for Kent to keep track of.
Yeah, good thing he's on the job, not me. But I'm just sensitive to maybe having some unintended consequences of creating this TIF zone, and then that ties our hands when a particular project comes along. So I'm just speaking in hypotheticals. We can address it kind of in our future policy meetings, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think anytime you're doing development incentives, that's going to reduce the TIF revenue for other
Right.
uses, or if you do a primary sector business, that's going to reduce it. So.
The one thing I will say is this is a generational thing. I think how this all turns out will affect the city of Fargo for multiple generations. And so that's why I think what you talked about, Jim, it's very complicated, but it's also, this is a once in a lifetime or multiple lifetime opportunity, because what goes on now will set the tone for decades and centuries. So that's it's very exciting, but it's also a little bit daunting. So it's fun. The other thing is it's in the opportunity zone, which is another, there's a lot of things that go along with that.
I agree completely as I was reading this. This is not a one-off project. This is a very large-scale, long-term project, and it forced me to write down in my notes here a rhetorical question. At what point have we accomplished our goals with downtown Fargo so that we can kind of shut these programs down? And that's a policy discussion we have in the future, but the size and scale of this and the success of all the other projects that are going on, I think at some point we got to revisit that question. We've talked about it in the past, and County Commission has raised that in the past as well, to saying, how long are we going to keep the pedal on the floor, and when can we let it up and just let the market take over? So again,
I'll just give you, and I know it's a bit of a point and counterpoint, but to me, having a vibrant downtown never stops. And to me, you have to continually work on it. When you stop working on it, then you start going backwards, and then it takes a lot longer to get back to where you were. That's just my editorial comment. Kent?
Yeah, what we've seen within this district, or maybe first on the downtown, we've seen the values go from 25 years or 20 years ago from about 200 million to where we're probably over 800 million. The entire value of private property within this TIF district is now 60 million. And while that's a big number, I think it's got the potential to go to 200 million if we make the right investments and bring in the right development. There's been a handful of projects, probably only 2 projects in this whole area, the condos to the north and now at 300 Main. So it's an area where there's been little activity kind of towards the river. And I think with our flood protection plan and some of these other things, it's a way to boost this area of the downtown that had not had much development.
And obviously lots of people and lots of programs deserve credit, but it isn't that they weren't increasing. The property values were going down 25 years ago. There was a lot of properties it was getting to be an issue for the city where it was affecting the budget. And that's why a lot of these programs got started, because people were getting very concerned. It's like, well, the property values are going down. So I think it's important for us to know the history of the past and some of the things that went on and how important it is to think that sometime we can just say, well, we're all done. The downtown is all done. I think that would be a disastrous mistake, because I think that's happened in the past. All right, I'm sorry, Kent, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in this listing of activities in year 3 to 5, there's a significant amount of public investment. And budgets, I see that on the page range wildly from 2 million to 10 million on certain projects. I mean, as you start to mix all of these things together, it becomes a bit complicated. I'm the one that personally does all the accounting on all these TIF districts. And I just wanted to say that as you move forward with this plan, that there will be a balance between the need to reserve some of that TIF money for the public portion of the project versus giving it in the form of a tax exemptive to the development community. And so there'll be a tit for tat on how we ration this money. But in the end, you only have so much capacity, and it may force us to do some long-term bonding on to get the projects done on the premise that this development will occur. So, I'm saying that just beware that this again is more complicated than what we have done in the past, albeit the one out on section 22, the matrix TIF, was the most complicated one we've done in years, and we got through that just fine. So I just wanted to share that with the audience, because we haven't been bonding, we haven't been borrowing for a lot of these, we've been doing TIF notes, which just simply means that the developer gets an exemption under the TIF law. And so we're not at risk, and we did that TIF note deployment to transfer the risk of non-development to the developer as opposed to the city. So we really cleaned up our risk profile in the policies and procedures that we've used in the past, and we've had great success with most all of our TIFs. So I wanted to get into some level of detail so you understood that.
I really agree with Kent. You need to be extremely cautious about taking on the public projects ahead of knowing the revenue is going to be there, because with Mercantile and Block 9, we knew that private development was going to happen. That was directly tied to it. If we went out and spent $10 million right now and there's no private development, there's no way to pay it back. And so the private development needs to start moving forward before I think we dare go ahead and do a lot of these other activities.
Mayor Mahoney.
I think Jimmy Ring's good question is how much do we need to support and go forward? When I go to New York City or San Francisco, I always like to see skyscrapers because they're continuing to build in their downtown area. We've had estimates of about 5,000 people to move in our downtown area, and I think we finally have developed an urban space that's beginning to grow. In the public area, we have a lot of stuff we have to do as well, and if we can capture some of the TIF money to do some of the public work area, that would be very helpful. I've had estimates of anywhere from $20 to $50 million that could be done in the public space that could enhance the area as well. And the amount I see this quadrant being used by people, it seems to me there is a lot of interest for us to develop some areas in here that can help to enhance the experience. So I do concur we need to look at our tax exempt policies and the complexity that we get into. Matrix was one of our most successful ones as well. But the public has to understand, even when we did the TIFs today, it's less than 2% of our tax base. We're not really pushing a lot of this out here, but we are trying to get some growth and development. And I do think it's a good time to re-reflect on our TIF policies, on our tax policies, so the public can understand them and then understand what they do. And I think, Jim, you have a draft somewhere where we started with $8 million worth of property, and now it's $340 million. So that's exactly, I'd love to have that return on my 401k, because you have really developed in the community, but that has decreased the taxes we have to do to the public. So it's a large space, but it appears we have a lot of opportunity for growth. And I agree with Commissioner Pepcorn. We got to figure out what to do with Mid-America Steel and get that going, because I know your developers might be interested in it, but we've got to clean it up and get it ready to go. So I'm very much excited about this particular project.
Very good. That's very good discussion. I'm losing my touch a little bit. It's 1:44, so I apologize for the length of our meeting. Is that everything on that one, Jim? Are we ready to move on? Or
We're
go
ready
ahead.
to move on to the Lewis and Clark Opportunity
Okay,
Fund.
we're moving on to number 5, Lewis and Clark Opportunity Fund. Jim.
Yeah, let me introduce John Mahachik from Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC. He's been working with both the Growth Initiative Fund and the Lewis and Clark Opportunity Fund One of the things the Opportunity Fund is, requires, it's a consortium of cities that have this loan program. And, but they want letters of support from the city to know whether or not, the city supports, applying for them. And we don't really have a mechanism set up for that. And so my thought was, why don't we use this committee to decide who should get the letters of support, that we would support their loan application. We're not deciding the loan application, but we'll have John talk a little bit about the fund and the type of projects, and then really probably looking for a recommendation to have this committee be the one that reviews the applications. So, John?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'll try to be as brief as possible because I know you have other agenda items. So as I talked about this, I want to say maybe July this summer I came and we talked a little bit about some context. So the document that Jim supplied you in the meeting is something I had prepared because last summer it was mentioned like it'd be nice to kind of have a process set in place. So I kind of created this just as a kind of a guide to see if it's helpful. So that first page is just really context of what Opportunity Fund is and how the PACE program works. So right now Bank of North Dakota, which has the PACE, it's a grant program. You need the matching community component for low interest financing. They're allowing the Opportunity Fund to act as the community contributor where a local community fund doesn't exist or chooses not to participate via their own fund due to their own policy or availability fund. So, for example, we have the Growth Initiative Fund, which the EDC manages. So we do have a community fund, but we limit it to primary sector. So in this case, it falls under, we're basically not making those decisions on that or doing flex pace for the non-primary sector projects. So then as you go on with the Opportunity Fund, it says then in that case, for the Opportunity Fund to serve as the community, they need the letter of support from the local body stating they support the project. And then, so it really then is up to the city to kind of decide that. So, it should be noted too, like a city doesn't dictate whether the project's good or whether it's anything with the creditworthiness. Your support only indicates that you're in support of the project and the objectives of the business meet your need of the community. So that's kind of the stuff I have kind of highlighted on that first page. So, as I prepared the stuff for Jim and the staff, I just kind of said the city may want to develop an efficient process so that it's really easy for everyone, easy for you to make that determination and easier for an applicant or a bank to know whether it's applicable. So that's kind of on page 2, I kind of gave examples of like, this is how I think that could be done. So for example, on the first one saying, determine what fits your strategy, what's a project you support. I mean, obviously you could say you support every project, but then you could at any term loan come in before you, let's say someone wanted to open a sandwich shop on 13th Avenue. I mean, you would kind of, this is where again, I think you could have the parameters. So because the flex space again is determined, is for, this is from the B&D website. Again, it's up to the community to determine if the objectives of the business meet the needs of the community. So I just kind of give some examples there. You could determine like, could the businesses be ones that bring new revenue and visitors, communities such as like a tourism, provide a community amenity or service that doesn't exist already, or they fill a gap that might be part of some of your city strategies. And then I just list some examples there. And then you'd have the process. I would say a very first process is like making sure before you even go down the roads that those applicants check with their bank and Bank of North Dakota to see if we should even pursue this. And then city would create basically a template letter to have them complete that so it has the information you would need. City staff would get that, assess it, yep, this seems to fit, or at least, the eligibility. They'd bring it to a group like yours for that decision. So that's really kind of it in a nutshell. And that's just kind of how I laid it out here again as maybe suggested guidance. It's kind of good steps. The main part would be just kind of determining those bullets of like, what are our core, and by our, I mean the city, what are the city's core objectives and strategies of a project you'd want to support?
So Jim, what do you have in mind for us as far as an action?
I think just want to find out if you'd be comfortable being this, committee that would review which applications we're going to provide a letter of support for. You did in one case on the daycare center, but it was really unclear who would do it. And then we went to city commission. If we could have city commission delegate that to this committee, and this committee meets monthly, then there'd be a set process and a set time frame for the applications, and continue to work with the EDC on, what applications are gonna be our focus. Is it, again, it's not probably every retailer, but, maybe there's some downtown or some, the primary sector ones, those should be our focus, so. This probably needs some more work, but,
Yeah, if I might add, like, I agree that I think it would be probably an easier process if it come to a committee like this versus having to go to the commission. And one thing to note too, with these funds that are approved, it's not like it's any city money that, it's just basically, these are federal funds that were set, came 10 years ago. They just need the cities basically to say, yes, you support this, because you have to be a city part of that. So again, I would recommend, like Jim would, just if you can maybe go to this committee, because it seems like trying to figure out any committee that's probably the most applicable, even though you're tax exempt review and this is not tax related.
Actually, this brings up a good point. I think we might want to think about changing the name of this committee. So I think former Commissioner Cosgriff came up with that idea. I think Kent has come across other committees where there's a better name. So that I think maybe we'll give a bonus prize for somebody who comes up with the best name for the committee. And then one more thing, John. So are you envisioning that the EDC you'll be involved with this and working with the city staff? The other thing I'm concerned about is us making commitments for the city staff. That seems like we do that a lot to make sure we know who is going to be doing this and how much that entails. So
Yeah, so for sure when it comes to the FlexPace program, any primary sector ones, like the EDC will take care of that through our growth initiative fund. Again, this would be the non-primary sector. I already serve on, this is kind of why I know so much about it. I serve on the steering committee and the loan committee of the Opportunity Fund since 2012. Yeah, and we'd be happy as the EDC to help with the process and do this. I wouldn't necessarily say we're going to be the ones deciding, like, yes, this bullet is the project again, that's the city's decision, but we're here, just like me creating this document for the process, we're here to help on that.
can I just ask one? So that's my question. So how do you envision this happening? That you would get something, it would go to Jim, and then Jim would bring it to this committee? Is that?
I would actually envision it that most likely, like, we might get a question because, like, say B&D's used to us doing FlexPace, and we'd remind them, hey, we only do the primary sector. So if it was that project that wasn't primary sector, I'd say, hey, this isn't something we're handling, and this happens to be a project in Fargo. I'd say, okay, you should talk to Jim and the staff of the city, and then I would provide any guidance that the staff here would need. Again, I think ideally if we get this set up well, it should be an easy process. But it's not like the EDC plans on doing a lot of hand holding with the borrower or anything, because they're not going to be a primary sector company, and it's just not kind of our territory.
Kent.
I had a question. Is this an underutilized program, or what has happened if it's been out there for all these years and there's this big balance to be loaned? Is it not widely understood? Is it confusing? And why hasn't there been a process in place?
So the fund, this part of the FlexPace for the fund is actually relatively new. So even though it's existed since 2012, B&D hasn't allowed this part until the last couple of years. So overall, my opinion is the fund has been a little bit underutilized, but that's just lately. At the very beginning, there was more activity, but it was mostly happening out west with all the oil activity going on. It was putting a lot of tightening on the banks out there, so they're using it. We haven't saw as much, and say we as someone on the committee there, haven't saw as much loan activity. Now we're seeing an uptick with this new program on it. And again, that's kind of where based on my knowledge of the committee, I was like kind of contacting Fargo, West Fargo, Castleton, who are the three communities in our area, saying that we should probably get some policies in place so you can take advantage of this FlexPace as well. It exists and it's available. We might as well be using it for good projects, good non-primary sector projects.
I think the change has been this Lewis and Clark Fund was not asking for that local input before. They were just deciding on their own. But I think the other thing is the money's been available. We just have not been promoting it, basically kind of unaware of it. And they've been aware of it, and most of it's been used out west.
Yeah, the main part of the program is a gap financing tool. So project might come in and be $1 million project, and their bank might only cover 70% of the financing, whereas the Opportunity Fund might come in and contribute 10 to 20% of that financing. That's their kind of bread and butter. This FlexPace is just a new component of it. It was that participation stuff that we haven't seen as much here. Like we've seen some projects, but not a ton, in my opinion.
So I guess from my perspective, it's another funding opportunity for a lot of businesses that we should be taking advantage of, to summarize it. And so it's,
Chairman Pepcorn?
yes.
Hi, this is Joe Raso. Can you hear me
Yes.
okay?
I do. I'm sorry, Joe, I should have called on you. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. The comments I'd add to what John shared, and where the conversation has been is, given that this program is real, John's kind of representing the city of Fargo as a representative or from our region on this board. And because of the changes with the program to allow, in this case, I think, the city to use those funds to support a project, I think it just gives an opportunity, as you were saying, for more companies, non-primary sector companies within Fargo, within the region. And as many of you know, we frequently communicate to the banking community through one-on-one conversations and through what's called our Smart Book, which lists all kinds of economic development assistance programs. And I think we may have the opportunity to include some language about this that could help local bankers who are working with local non-primary sector companies. So there's a number of ways that we can support this without being the entity to kind of stick handle the management of those applications.
That's great, Joe. Thank you very much. And so I think for us to proceed, we can just basically say, I don't know if you need a motion even, Jim, but just to proceed.
I think maybe just a motion to have recommend that the city commission designate this committee as a review authority for the applications that come in. And then we'll draft a policy.
Very good. If that makes sense to everybody, we'll accept the motion unless there's some comments that you'd like to change it. Otherwise, we'll accept the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Number 6, discuss changes to tax-exempt policy. Jim?
As you probably recall, a few years ago, we updated our tax-exempt policy, and the idea was that we would update it kind of after every city commission election, just to see if there's a change in philosophy. So the city commission will probably be meeting here in the next week to talk about incentives in general, but there are some things initially that I'd like to discuss with you about potential changes. One is really the format, and I've got this up on the screen, I think it was in your packet, is, right now our list, as you read through the policies, you kind of go through TIF and then pilot. And pilot is such a broad program that, quite frankly, it really does confuse a lot of our applicants, because if you're creating jobs and you're reading the policy, you say, what's all this stuff about housing about? And if you're trying to get a pilot for housing, you're saying, why are you asking me about creating jobs? And it, it doesn't follow real well. And so rather than kind of have a policy by remodeling, I think it could be organized into 3 main categories. One is economic development, which is job creation. That's a case where our primary criteria is how many jobs and how much investment. We don't do the but-for test on that. Where if it's redevelopment, it's going beyond 5 years, then we're generally requiring that but-for test. And then the other would be, just housing in general. When we're dealing with affordable housing, that's a whole different set of criteria. You almost don't need the but-for test because they're so difficult to finance that, we've done the reviews, but it's just so obvious that if you're going to have restricted rents, you can't afford to pay the full property taxes. So, even without any changes, I'm suggesting we kind of reorganize that format so that someone interested in whether it's redevelopment or housing or jobs would have more of a shorter thing to look at, and there could be multiple tools under each of those. So we'll have some discussion on that. The other is to update that scoring system. I'll be working with EDC on that. We don't have anything suggested yet, but we've seen in the past where some projects didn't get 100 points, but we really liked them anyway, and we recommended approval. And so they're really trying to match up our scoring system more with our overall goals. Another idea was to start the TIF assistance a request with this community, or this committee. In the past, we've gone to city commission before, and I've had comments from the mayor and Dave Pepcorn who said, really, these TIF requests probably be better to start with this community to decide whether or not we'd work on the but-for test rather than the full city commission. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that one. And then the other thing is whether or not we would actually do any more TIFs and more of that greenfield development. We've had 2 requests this year, one from High Development for an industrial park in the north, the other redevelopment to the Anderson Field project where they've got the city commission and they declined to support even working on those. And so if that's our overall philosophy, I'd rather just put that in the policy so that I could, tell people that are interested in, TIFs for a greenfield that we simply don't do those. I think if you start to do them, you're going to get flooded with them. And so I just want to get your thoughts on those 4 items, maybe first on the overall format, if you're comfortable with that change.
Any comments? If you don't mind, I'll start it out. I think it's great that we're trying to make improvements. I think that's there might be other people with other ideas too, because I think this isn't just a static thing, and I do think that we can refine it to make it better. Those make sense to me. I don't know if anybody has any. Mayor Mahoney.
Well, Jim, I think we do have to tackle the issue, do TIFs or pilots in the out spaces. So the lights is a good example. We probably wouldn't do a 25-year one. We might look at something else. What are you fully going to develop? Robert Wilson is here too, and I think it'd be nice to have what the county might be more interested in so we can work together. So a developer can say, here's the criteria. Do you qualify or don't you? So we, again, don't have that. Commissioner Pepcorn and I did talk about sometimes go to the commission, but we have no data. So if we say up or down, it's just we don't really know if it qualifies or doesn't qualify per present policy. But this committee, Economic Growth Committee here, or whatever name we're going to eventually come up with, Dave, is that should have a little better sense. Jim, you've been on this committee forever. And, you kind of have a sense of what might qualify or what we feel as a public might accept us to do. I could want to like a little bit in your qualification brackets. I like the scoring system when it came up today. There's no question that 2 projects we saw here were well qualified to get the exemptions they asked for. It really makes it easier for us on the politics side if there's a scoring system and if they come out in the score and do well. And to your point, you might need an exemption. You might need to have something else that has some value to the community. But when I look at the present policy, it looks confusing, and I think people get confused what we will accept or not accept. And we go on, I'm surprised our committee sometimes be unanimous on it, and it goes to the commission and they don't see the same value we see. So yes, if we could clean it up a bit, you qualify if these things happen, make the county maybe a little more comfortable so they don't get the, well, you didn't do this or didn't do that. What answers do they need to qualify or give one? But I'm excited to see what a redo would do.
Can I just make one comment about the greenfield thing? I think that just because a couple weren't passed doesn't mean we should eliminate that, because sometimes there's unique stories or unique things. I totally agree. Some of them don't pass, but that doesn't mean you just say we should quit doing those. I guess that's my opinion. I'd love to hear anybody else's opinion on that and the other things too.
I had a question or a comment on the but-for test. I mean, the cost of those, we run that through a financial analyst, it's about $5,000. And I think prior, we had changed the policy. We wanted to get it to the commission, so it was either up or down and then send it back to actually do that. That was for the benefit of the developer to try to avoid some cost that maybe it was never a starter. So, Jim, I wonder if you could comment on that. It seems logical to pass it through a committee that knows the criteria, knows how we're handling these things, and can make a solid recommendation. And so,
yeah, I think that initial review is not just the the $5,000 cost that's passed on to the developer, but our attorney has to spend an extensive amount of time drafting a development agreement. We've got to write a renewal plan, and so there's a lot of staff time that goes in. And so we like to have sort of some check-in with a committee before we get off on I don't know how you would have voted if the Paul Hyde one had come in, or the proposed Anderson Field one would have come in, and if would have seen that as having any value. But yeah, I think this committee is probably well suited to look at the data and look at the finances, maybe a little bit more than the city commission. We have finance people on this committee. Right.
Yeah, and just as a point of reference, those used to go directly to the finance committee, and we were certainly able to work our way through it, but it was deemed to be more efficient to pass them through this committee.
Right. Bruce?
Just a quick comment, Jim, I really like your proposed format. A couple of weeks ago, I read through our policy book and went to you, and you've done a good job making it a little more understandable for somebody like me. So I really like that. I as well like the scoring bit because I'm an engineer by trade, so anytime you can quantify an answer, that's kind of who I am. So, and I like this committee as the stepping stone to the city commission.
Yeah, I think one of the changes, and I like to have Bruhala come up and talk a little bit about their TIF requests, where they're kind of stuck in the pipeline, if you will, because the commission wants to have this exemption meeting, and so they've kind of put everything on hold. We've talked about having this committee review the ones to start, and so they're going to take this, at least that idea, to the city commission at the April 5th meeting, but rather than have them wait until your April meeting, I thought maybe we could take a look at it today and see if at least this committee thinks it's one worth working on and getting started on. So if you'd indulge that added item, I'd appreciate it.
And Commissioner Pepcorn's comment as well, I think greenfields, when you look at the Kmart lot, that's a brownfield or a gray field right now. It's got existing structure, it's blighted, something has to be done. The brew hall is the same place. You've got stuff that's not exactly greenfield, but you have some stuff we'll have to dig into and do some stuff. And even the site that's out by the zoo, it has some stuff, doesn't have other stuff. So all those have a mixture, but we are going to have a challenge as a city. To Jim's comment, is it going to do everything downtown, or we're going to start incentivizing things, little mini downtowns throughout the city? And I would like to have a policy on that so we can say, yes, we're looking at this. So that's final comment on that. Thanks, Commissioner Pepcorn.
If you would, then, do we want to let me have them present the Bruhala concept and see if you're comfortable with that, at least potentially being eligible as a TIF? And
Sure, and if you don't mind, Jim, if you gentlemen want to come on up and introduce yourselves, and while you're coming up, I'll just give a short summary. So we've been meeting with them, and I think they basically, what we would do today is they would begin the preliminary evaluation like we've done with other ones. And so that's kind of what we're considering. We've obviously, I'm sure they'll tell their story, but the building that they're in now, it was, it needed a lot of work, and they did not ask for any incentives when that building was redone. And now they're in a spot where they're looking to expand. And so what we'd be doing today is just basically starting the review process, and it would still go to the city commission. And so with that fairly lame preview, I apologize for that. But Mark, if you want to, and if you don't mind telling a little bit of the story about the building, because I do think that's a legitimate thing. Back in the day, I would have loved to have bought that building. I drove by it all the time and go, man, that thing could really be cool. But Kevin put in so much into that. And I would have run out of money before I ran out of love with that building. And so, but I will say that's added to our community. That building is now, it's beautiful, and that neighborhood needs a lot of love. And to me, that building can be kind of the center of that. So I'm sorry for rambling, Mark, but you start, and then Kevin, if you don't mind, I'd like to have you join in too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Like Mr. Gilmore said, we've kind of been stuck in the middle with some of these transitions, and so we got a little bit of a late ask to present this to this committee. So I'll keep it brief, and maybe I think there's probably gonna be a lot more questions than things I'll talk about. Really, where this project comes from is in the interest of what Drecker does as a company and what our vision for a community is. We happen to make beer. That's what we do, but there's a lot deeper story of why we do it. We're community focused, and we're a space making, kind of an experience focused company. So this project really builds that out and creates a part of Fargo that makes Fargo the community that we want to be a part of, and creates some wonderment and excitement around living in Fargo. So here's the project that we have. It's an addition to the west side of the current, what you know as the Drecker Brewery. And really our vision with this space is to create an inspirational and activated space for the community to gather, to foster local businesses, celebrate with events, and encourage tourism that is all focused on providing a truly unique Fargo experience. That's something that we're really proud of to represent Fargo. We distribute our products across 35 states and now 10 countries. And really when that began, we were outward looking, trying to find a place for ourselves across the country to make a name for our company. We've gotten a great reception across the nation. We've been really engaged with customers across the world really. And now we're falling back into drawing that back to Fargo. We want to bring people back to Fargo, to that experience, to show them what we love about Fargo and show them a little bit about the experience that we want to create. So Brewhalla is, in all of its parts, a food hall and market, a community market, an event space, a conference center, an experience-focused lodging, and residential living. But these aren't 6 components that stand alone. They're not siloed. These are all fully integrated, connected to each other to create this, experience business incubator. Under its stats, it's a 100,000 square foot building with two market floors, 2 event spaces. See, it's slightly varying size, but these are large event rooms. Multiple smaller event spaces, balconies, outdoor courtyard, multiple different types of businesses, spaces for continued pop-ups and community activations within the building. In our area that we're doing this, we have the ability to add actually quite a bit of parking and be a self-sustained project. This doesn't dump out into the neighborhood. We don't cause a traffic issue or parking issues like that. And then it also starts to build this campus community out into a blighted neighborhood that we're really trying to revitalize with a business district that now includes Ice House Fit, Inner Office, Rail Yard Co-working Space, and Drecker Brewing Company. So it's estimated a $20 million project. Under all of the businesses involved, we estimate that a total of 200 jobs and roughly 100 FTEs will be created. There's an annual economic impact of around $17 million and over $1 million in simply annual sales tax. Part of that becomes from the escalated taxes of alcohol and lodging. And this is the hard one to estimate, but we really see about a $500,000 in annual attendance added with the addition of this building. So there's some significant community benefits to this building, and that's what brings us to this committee. There's some aspects that we're taking on in this project that I think are quite altruistic and extend into the community, and that's why we're asking for the support of the city with this TIF request. It's also important to note that we're not asking for a bonded TIF. This is a no-risk, pay-as-you-go TIF to be reimbursed from real extraordinary costs. So the community benefits in this project really are the convention center. There's 2 roughly 5,000 square foot event halls, and then an 11,500 of small event or breakout space. That's a pretty decent convention center that, with working with the CVB, it's maybe not the size that the city had proposed on their build, but this is a private project that I think covers a lot of those bases and fulfills those needs for the community. It functions as a small business incubator. There's roughly 20 small businesses that will be joining us in the market. Many of these businesses do not currently have a brick and mortar ability in Fargo. They're a concept that is smaller than a normal conventional retail space, or they would need to be in an area of such retail cost that it would overwhelm their ability to generate revenue. So really what we're doing here is, say, taking concepts out of a makers festival or, say, the Red River Market, and giving those businesses a stepping stone to becoming a full brick and mortar, and giving them a community collaborative environment so they can all work together and have a better space. It's an infill project into a current neighborhood, revitalizing a neighborhood that is ripe for some sunlight and some new things to happen. This project also enables future development. Some of the costs that we've talked about here actually facilitate neighboring properties to have better or easier development opportunities. It's a tourism magnet. Right now, just the brewery itself is the number 4 rated tourism aspect in Fargo. And really, at the brewery, we see a significant portion of our patrons come from outside of the Fargo community. So this draws tourism and all the economic impact that comes along with that. It's a jobs creator. Those are significant numbers that we talked about in all of the different businesses that participate in this building. And then it's possible future tax generation. The extraordinary costs associated with this are really the complicated land acquisition. We had to do to connect the parcels and make that all work. We had to acquire some property across the street, improve those, trade that over. Really what that did is provide a better space for Ferguson Pipe Yard to connect their things. No longer will they be having to drive those pipes across the busy First Avenue corridor, and really makes for a better neighborhood, better usage out there. But that was a quite complicated and financially intensive acquisition. The site itself was the landfill of the demolition of the Fargo Central High School. So in our core samples, we know there's rubble underneath there, and that significantly complicates the excavation and adds costs and time. The soil conditions are also need to be built back up for what's there to support the foundation and development building there. The demolition and site work associated with all of those, the land acquisition, and then the public works improvement with sanitary sewer and other utilities that are going to be brought in, not just for this site, but like I mentioned, those neighboring properties that currently don't have because of there's a storm sewer that complicates a neighboring property, a coulee in there, and we can provide access through our property that we think helps to build a bigger neighborhood with that. I have renderings and drawings of the building. I can explain things further, but I'd be much happy to move into questions and discuss this with the committee.
Very good. Questions. And Kevin, could you just give a little bit of a summary of the history of the building and your experience, if nothing else, for my own personal enjoyment, because it's a great thing.
I'm happy to do so. We bought the property, I don't even know, probably 6-7 years ago, with the idea that we were looking for warehouse space, and we wanted some warehouse space that was close to downtown. We tried for probably the better part of a couple of years to develop that as warehouse property, and we're pretty close to renting some space there, and it would have just been pure warehouse and outdoor yard area. That fell through, and we were looking for some different ideas on how to develop the site. And I don't know why we didn't think about this sooner, but we thought, well, with the amount of land area that's there, we could put a lot of parking in. There were a lot of buildings there. We looked at each building individually, trying to figure out what to do with each one, and kind of by a happenstance talked to Drecker about the brick building, and they had a similar vision to what we did on the brick building. And we kind of gave them an idea of what we were thinking about with the whole complex, and everything just sort of gelled. But the development includes 5 different buildings. Each one of them, the development occurred one at a time. And that's why we didn't come before the city commission or planning commission or a group like this asking for some incentives. We were able to develop the project one building at a time, maybe one building a year, essentially, and over a long period of time, we ended up with a very successful complex. But this other project that we're talking about now is a much bigger hill to climb, a $20 million project versus a series of $1 million projects and so on. Our experience on the first project, though, has educated us a little bit on what to expect with this site. The brick building that Drecker is in right now, and actually my residence is in as well, was built in 1883, 82, 80, 80.
Over the course of those, I think the brewery building was probably built in 1880.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent northern additions were over the 1881, 2, 3.
Yeah. I think in the handouts that we sent, there's a picture of sort of a roundhouse building that was built around the same time as the original building was built. And that no longer is there, but it's on the site where we are. As we dug for utilities and foundations on the current site, we encountered foundations, brick debris, concrete, whatever, all along. Every place we dug, we were digging through masonry foundations or concrete foundations. We salvaged some of those and integrated them into some of the site work, some brick fencing and seating and other things like that. But we know we're going to run into the same thing next door because there's photographic evidence of buildings that were in that location. And typically when those buildings were demolished, they were just demoed in place. They weren't hauled out. They weren't, foundations weren't hauled out or anything like that. So even though this looks like a pretty clean site, a pretty undeveloped site, it's a 140-year-old site and 140 years of development in and around that area. We're fortunate that we don't have any evidence of environmental contaminants or anything like that, but we don't know what we're going to find once we start digging there. But right now we think it's mostly rubble and other debris like that. So when we dig up our foundations, we're going to have to deal with it, but also when we bring our utility lines in, we're going to have to deal with that as well. And so that's the primary part of the additional costs that we're running into.
I just wanted to thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for saving that building, because to me, that was, it's an iconic building, and I know there was much more to it than you originally thought there was going to be. And so thank you very much. And obviously having Drecker here, I was there one day when you had a release. If you would talk a little bit about that, when you release a new, I thought they were giving out concert tickets or something. There was a line, and it was during the winter. Just talk a little bit about that, Mark.
Sure. So, part of our philosophy really is this creative aspect, and so we like to create a lot of different things, not five beers we make all year. In 2020, we made 125 different beers, 80 of them being brand new. That's a significant strain because at the core we're a manufacturing facility, and that putting that many products through there is incredible. So every other week, I think you were there for one of our releases. Every other Friday we release new beers. That's anywhere from 5 to 10 different beers that we'll be releasing. And that release will generate, anywhere from, I'd say the lineup at opening is anywhere from 50 to 500 people. And I think you were there for what is pretty typical release. And just in our estimates, like I said, over 50% of those people are coming from outside of the Fargo-Moorhead area, mainly Minneapolis and Wisconsin. And so that's where one of the big draws becomes is they're always asking us, when they come to Fargo, we have the distinct opportunity of getting to show them our favorite things about Fargo. And so they're asking for where they should stay, what's a cool experience that they should go and do in Fargo, and then where should they go eat. And that's probably the one we're most educated on, I guess. But so that's where this project comes from, is we want to be able to offer that whole encompassing experience. So as people come here and travel, we can provide them lodging, we can provide them other great businesses in Fargo, and then create space-making events to entertain everybody.
Can I ask, and I apologize for monopolizing, but can you talk a little bit about the market space? And then for the mayor's benefit, can you talk about the fresh seafood?
Oh, sure.
And they're also going to have an oyster bar. So that's...
I left the slide up there just for the mayor. Yeah, so you asked about the market space for our products, or...
So in some of the bigger cities now, they have these where there's
Sure.
multiple vendors, and they can't afford a bigger storefront, but this is kind of an opportunity.
Yeah. So food halls are a really growing trend in the restaurant and entertainment business. Interestingly, food halls were ranked as the number one successful business model during the pandemic for any of this. They provide the most amount of distancing. They're a really keen combination of on-site and off-site. They're really geared for any of those switches. And so what this does is it functions as, let's say, an indoor farmer's market, or this indoor collaborative space where multiple different businesses can have really quite small spaces. They don't have to over-rent their space. They're not dealing with their own bathroom or walkways or any of those things. They're really taking on their own space that's related to their core businesses. And then that group draws collectively. It draws as a whole, where maybe you have some sort of food item that they wouldn't be able to draw traffic or a significant number of traffic to their store alone. But when they're next to an oyster place that is drawing a lot of traffic, or a brewery, or an ice cream thing, that all these things collectively start to create a community draw that now benefits each other. And so in these other communities, you start to see these become a really popular dining options because of the multiple options. It's an popular shopping experience because it's food, it's local makers, it's really diverse in its options. And then oftentimes they're going into blighted areas, they're revitalizing communities, and they have a connection around community spaces, events, and ways that you can make a common communal space in there. That's one thing that we really built into the design of this building. Is this is a significantly large interior building, and we have a passion for farmers market and outdoor spaces, but we also know that we know and love Fargo for what it is, and that's 9 months out of the year we have to think about living inside. And so inside this building, you can see this is looking down into the market, and this is looking up inside the market. We're trying to create our own indoor dome here, and so this really is a beautiful, engaging, and inspiring space, and something that we've seen very popular in other major metro areas. And then we've worked very hard to make this kind of a Fargo-specific and Fargo-appropriate design.
Mayor Mahoney.
Move to approve a TIF evaluation of this project.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And do we have any, we have plenty of time for questions, so if there's any other
I
questions.
think Commissioner Pepcorn, you've been very enthusiastic about this project. But at a time, I think that we're past our time. But you're bringing Faneuil Hall to me as I see it, because you're bringing a space that's very much like that in Boston. And this is a fantastic idea. You really, Mark, have thought of all the different elements that you'd like to have. And it revitalizes that neighborhood very, very much.
And so just to clarify, this is the initial step, evaluating the project. It will come back to us, Jim, and then it will go on to the city commission, or how will it go?
Yeah, it'll come back to,
Okay,
have the city commission concur that things will now be starting with this committee. They'll get the business plan to me, we'll send it to our financial advisor. That will come back to you, and you can decide, yes, this is a reasonable request, or maybe it should be different.
okay.
And then that would go on to city commission.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'll,
I just wanted to say that in our existing TIF policy, there's a lot of criteria with regard to the site preparation and remediation of certain elements that they talked about. So I just think in looking at the list of the budgeted categories, they clearly fit within our TIF policy. I just want to say that.
very good. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It's 2:27. We are adjourned.